So Avowed is a pretty big game and lots of things can go wrong. Today we'll take a look at the biggest tips everyone should know before heading in, as well as some mistakes I was also guilty of the first time I picked it up. At number 1, upgrades are very important. Yes, the level of your character matters, but so does that of your weapons and gear. And in Avowed, you can see how strong you are in relation to the enemy you're fighting by checking out this icon next to their HP bar, which pretty much indicates how overleveled they are compared to you. And that is why you're going to want to constantly make upgrades to weapons and armor and break down what you don't need so that you can funnel those resulting resources into upgrading your better gear. Always check out enemies' HP bar and make sure that they don't have too many skulls on their names. This means they are significantly stronger compared to you, which means it's going to be increasingly more challenging for you to take them down. The more difficult an enemy or boss, the higher tier and more stars it will feature, which means the better upgrades you will need if you want to take it down efficiently. Additionally, your companions will also remark if you are severely underleveled compared to the mobs you're fighting, so it's always worth it to pay attention to them. That is why I suggested in the Perfect Start Guide to also focus on unique items from very early on. They are very abundant, and I already posted a guide with some very amazing examples you can get pretty much within the first couple of hours. Also, uniques can be upgraded to legendary quality, which no other type of gear can, meaning that you can reach the highest possible stats and bonuses by focusing exclusively on this type of loot. For example, the early weapons we covered from the previous video featured some strong fire and frost enhancements, so they can actually have some extra bonuses on targets. Besides that, the other thing you should probably check out is also your enchantment table, which you can find at pretty much any of your camps. In this case, you can get your unique weapons to a whole different level by just enchanting them once. Yes, it will cost quite a bit in terms of resources, but for example, the Last Light of Day, which is that one-handed sword we covered before, can be made so much stronger because that healing on kill effect can be made pretty much 3 times stronger by just enhancing it once. So totally worth it, and it can carry you all the way into the end game by just doing this one single upgrade to it. Moving on next, exploration is highly rewarding in Avowed. You will find hidden chests full of upgrade materials, unique weapons, or even armors. No loot in this game is useless either. At the very least, you can break it down and funnel its resources into upgrading some of your other loot. Plus, of course, upgrading mats can be both downgraded or promoted to the next tier of quality. That's why I also recommend always carrying lockpicks with you no matter what. They are very inexpensive, you can pretty much buy them from almost every merchant, but you will find many locked chests and closed gates that can only be opened up with them. Furthermore, exploring the world of Avowed, you will inevitably meet with environmental puzzles. So that is why early on, it's wise to keep the starting common grimoire at hand during the first hours of gameplay, at least until you get some better options, since this is going to give you some extra spells that can help you with elemental puzzles. Like there will be many, for example, webs that you will want to burn down to clear a path ahead, or form ice platforms to reach the other side of a broken bridge. And generally, if you see any climbable platform or any structure that you can feasibly make your way at the top in, definitely go ahead and do that, because more often than not, this will bring you to a location with some extra treasures, such as going across rooftops, at the top of buildings, or even accessing rooftops to get inside otherwise locked buildings. And some treasures can be found in water as well, so paying attention to small openings beneath the water surface can definitely be helpful. Moving on though, one thing I recommend doing is paying attention to Totem Fragments, because if you collect enough of them, you can actually get some massive bonuses to stats, companions, and pretty much your own abilities can get boosted with extra effects as well. So in this case, if you find such a fragment, you can head over to that totem stand in your camp next to the enchanting station, and you can pretty much activate them to have all of these bonuses applied right here. So for example, just in the first map, there are 6 of these fragments you can find right here at these specific locations. So you can get some extra bonuses to your stats. You can even get extra cooldown reductions to abilities, or extra effects to your abilities, such as forming a ring of fire when triggering second wind, or extra healing on revive, and so on. Moving on to combat, dodging, parrying, or blocking will be your best friends for survivability. But be mindful because they all consume a ton of stamina. So if possible, focus on one or the other, depending on your class archetype of choice. For example, blocking is done using shields, while parrying is used by equipping one-handed weapons and no offhand. Similarly, the ranger will have many skills that help with dodges if you prefer that instead. But besides this, many weapon enchantments will be based on successfully parrying or blocking attacks if you want those extra effects, so make sure that you also match whatever you're doing with that specific effect. Otherwise, if you're having trouble dodging, parrying, or blocking, just pay attention to all the indications that the game gives you. Besides the fact that your companions will actively shout if you're about to get attacked by an enemy, you can also pay attention to the enemies overhead. You will have all of these threat markers resembling arrows, which means an enemy is about to attack you. Similarly, if enemies tend to be off screen or about to shoot ranged attacks towards you, you should see the red markers for ranged attacks also popping up. Besides that, exploiting the enemy's weak points and paying attention to the enemy stun meter can help a ton in combat. Specifically, the higher the stun damage of your weapon, the easier it is to fill up that stun meter below the enemy's HP bar. Once it's fully filled, it's going to flash yellow, point at which you can perform a finisher move which deals a massive amount of damage, letting you take them down much quicker in the process. And you can even build around stunning enemies faster, as many of the weapons may have different stun values over there that you may want to prioritize. Similarly, weak points can be exploited with ranged weapons, such as bows for example. Whenever you equip a ranged weapon, you can highlight those weak points, and if you hit them, you can deal increased damage. And if all of this fails, approaching enemies stealthily either from tall grass or by crouching behind them can actually give you an even bigger advantage, as you will always deal bonus damage, so maybe reserve your strongest abilities for a stealth attack that way. Oh, and before we move on, also make sure to prioritize healers in big group situations. The last thing you want is to fight a big boss enemy, be left with very low HP only for a nearby priest to heal it back to high HP. So make sure you take them down before any of that happens. But let's keep on going, and a big mistake you may be doing is equipping just any gear piece without paying attention to the resource penalties, especially to stamina and essences. And specifically, medium and even more so heavy gear come with big penalties to those. That is why, to avoid or at least mitigate some of that, choose some of these bonuses right here in the fighter and the wizard ability trees, as these are going to reduce that penalty significantly so that you can actually perform better. Which means if you invest in these points, you can create better hybrids. Like for example, let's say you want to play as a battle mage, somebody who uses heavy armor but also wants to use spells. Investing into those penalty points can help quite a bit. Since pretty much all of your weapons, including ones, consume stamina, and since all of your abilities consume essence, you're going to want to prioritize these quite a bit so that you mitigate those penalties from your build. And since we talked about skills, let's also talk about passive skill checks. Some dialogue options will require a certain level of a particular skill, and passing that skill check might help to reach a different outcome from a certain important conversation. Say you're a completionist, want to get a specific game ending, or just want to see the best outcome at the current mission. Some of these skill checks can help from going into a place without being met with any conflict, all the way to having to defeat a whole bunch of enemies before you can get in. In this case, either use accessories which grant skill points, or if you have enough gold, you can even respec, pass that skill check, and then respec again back to your previous build. But dialogue choices also matter, so all of your choices will lead to a different endgame, and some of these choices will have nearly immediate effects. Some will even matter a lot in terms of the endgame. Without giving spoilers again, it will affect how certain NPCs will even view you, relate to you, or interact with you, including that strange voice in your head. At number 6, you may also want to check merchants often. Yes, most of the gear will be acquired by exploration, but each map, and especially the bigger hubs, feature merchants who will sell unique items, and sometimes these items can be extremely strong. I recommend going to main towns first in each map, check their items, and if you think that something there suits your build, sell some of your gear, make a bit of money, and then purchase the item you need. Each map merchant will sell gear with the map's quality level, which in this case will be the lowest at that stage, but might be higher than what you got up until that point, even if it was upgraded. Some merchants, however, you might find them in various hidden spots around the map, so be on the lookout for those as well. But one resource to pay attention to is Starmetal fragments. You can even find some of this starting from the very first map. But if you collect them, you will eventually encounter a blacksmith in the final map who will offer to craft 2 types of weapons. And you may choose both depending on how much you collected up until that point, or choose the one that fits your playstyle the most. In either of these situations, any of the extra star metal that you might have can also be further used to upgrade that weapon of choice, so definitely make sure that you have enough of that by the time you reach the endgame. At number 7, companions are highly valuable in exploration and especially so in combat, and you can make use of the action radial to issue commands to your party, which attacks to use, choose from consumables or other godlike abilities, or bind abilities to the quick slot. But regarding exploration abilities, your first companion, which is Sky, will be able to burn spider webs and tangled vines to help you reach those areas if you don't have a fire source yourself. Marius, you will find him during your quest in the main first city, but he can use Hunter's Sense, a skill which identifies enemies, loot, and plants in the surrounding areas. Very useful to find extra items. Giara, which is your second map companion, will use Spectral Jolt, which is a shock ability used to activate essence generators. And finally, Yatsli will have a unique ability called Dispel Illusion, revealing hidden loot or other objects. Your companions will offer to train you as well, so make sure that you talk with them often at the camp whenever you see them with an exclamation mark. For example, if you train with Kai, which you can do from very early on, you can get some very nice skills to invest into, and if you finish these training sessions, you can get some permanent buffs to those skills as well. At number 8, let's talk about bounties. Each map features at least a handful of them, but you can easily pick them from any main town. You may also randomly encounter them while exploring and are able to give them in as long as you've collected the bounty item from the boss that involves it. This will help with some extra gold and sometimes also unique gear. For example, I did this bounty in map 2 that allowed me to get several uniques, including a very strong pair of gauntlets with extra damage and bonus to shock. There are about 5 bounties, like I said, in each of the game's map, and almost all of them will be worth it, at the very least, if not for the uniques, for the extra XP and gold that you get from them. At number 9, one thing I should have probably mentioned a bit earlier is that both cooking and also throwables are very useful in this game. Cooking in particular, I would say, is essential because food grants health and essence regeneration and oftentimes also extra buffs. This also works in combat, by the way. If you want to regenerate your HP or essence, or even more so, some of these drinks can actually provide attribute points for a brief time, which can be used in this case also to pass some of the skill checks that we talked about previously. And you can easily craft foods, add the cauldron back in your camp. You can even just let the game auto-select ingredients for your desired recipe. Additionally, you can also craft grenades at the very same cauldron, which I recommend. They do come in quite handy. But it's not like completely needed because you will find throwables literally everywhere if you keep an eye out. Especially so, make sure to collect all of the grenades you can as you explore the environments and the maps. Grenades in particular can cause explosions, which can build up stun on the enemies, so stunning them can become much easier as a result. Furthermore, Magran's Fury, this can burn barriers and cause fire buildup on enemies if you want to play with a fire build. There's also a frost variant of that can cause frost buildup, so you can either freeze enemies, gates, or even cause some of these stepping platforms to emerge in water if you want to reach the other side. And electric lily seeds that can build up shock, but do be careful because if you sit in water, yes, it will help to reach out multiple enemies, but it can also affect you if you're not being careful. And finally, the Forgotten Soul Pods, which can build up, in this case, poison on enemies for some extra damage over time. And finally, this brings us to number 10. We have a few extra tips in no particular order. One of them is that stealing has no consequences, so you may just go in any house, loot the NPCs right under their noses, and while some of them may react to it vocally, none will actually do anything of consequence, so just steal everybody in plain daylight. Also, sell your jewelry, no need to keep it, you can pretty much make a ton of money that way. I did a mistake in my first playthrough and basically by the time I reached the end game, I had so many jewels that I did not sell, and when I did it, I got like 10k gold, which came in very handy at that point. Also, treasure maps, we talked about these previously, but they are very important. You can either find these randomly in the open world or by buying them at various merchants very cheaply, but they can lead to some very useful exclusive items that you can get that way, like powerful treasures and unique items that you can find. And with this, you're pretty much going to be good to go in Avowed, get everything up and ready, and get the best possible start as well. And that is pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.